Base Luffy. This is Luffy at the very start of his journey. Before we had gears, before Haki took over the spotlight. Yeah, just Luffy, with pure stretching powers. And the whole world of One Piece saw him as a joke. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The Gomu Gomu no Mi, in theory, is one of the worst devil fruits ever shown in the series. You eat it and you can't swim. For a pirate, that's almost suicide. So, what do you get in return? A body that stretches like rubber? No elemental immunity like a Logia. No crazy broken abilities like some other Paramecia. Even characters inside the series laughed at Luffy because of this fruit. But this is where Oda was actually smart. And this is what most analysis completely miss. The Gomu Gomu no Mi isn't an ability. It's an engine. A rubber body by itself isn't strong. But it's the foundation that lets Luffy turn physics into a weapon in ways nobody expected. He pulls his arm back and launches it straight into his enemy's face. That's literally the principle of a slingshot. He's using his own body like one. Momentum increases with distance, not just muscle. That's why Luffy could knock out enemies way heavier than him, even in East Blue. Even when his raw stats weren't anything special. On top of that, total immunity to electricity. The thing that decided the entire Skypiea arc wasn't just a lucky break. Rubber is a natural insulator. When Enel, a man with god-level lightning power, stood in front of Luffy and couldn't do anything. That was the first time the series showed us matchup beats, stats. He's actually extremely creative. And his rubber body lets him use that endless creativity to the fullest. And that, later on, becomes the core theme of the entire series. Water Luffy. This is the transformation casual viewers remember, because it's funny. The kid carrying a barrel of water into a fight. But if you stop there, you miss the most interesting part of it. The mechanic is simple. Logia users like Crocodile work by separating from physical matter. Attacks pass straight through them because their bodies turn into an element. Water makes sand clump together, forcing Crocodile's body back into a solid state. And that's when Luffy can actually hit him. But here's what most analysis miss. Water Luffy is actually an early version of the Haki concept. Armament Haki later works on the same logic. It forces Logia users into a physical state, bypassing their intangibility. Oda tested that concept back in Alabasta, just with a barrel of water, instead of a more complex power system. Water Luffy wasn't random improvisation. It was Oda setting up the rule for how to defeat Logia users before Haki was fully systemized. What's even more interesting is the upgrade between Fight 2 and Fight 3 when he ran out of water. Luffy used his own blood. Same principle. Same type of liquid. The only difference is that this time, he didn't need to prepare anything in advance. That was real-time combat adaptation. No script. Water Luffy only existed for one arc and then disappeared. But the logic behind it. The series is still using it to this day. Big shout out to everyone who's been here. From the Naruto videos to all the fun chats and comments. You guys are the reason I keep making content and sharing awesome moments. We're super close to hitting 1,000 subs. If you're into anime, love digging into hidden details, wild theories, and top quality videos, smash that subscribe button and let's hit 1K together. Drop a comment with your favorite character or ideas for the next video. I really value your feedback. Now, Nightmare Luffy. Thriller Bark is one of the most underrated arcs in One Piece. And Nightmare Luffy is the biggest reason it deserves more credit than most people remember. The mechanics of this form are very specific when a shadow is put into a living person. It transfers both the skills and the physical strength of the shadow's original owner. But it only lasts about 10 minutes before it leaves on its own. A normal person can only handle 2 or 3 shadows before reaching their limit. Luffy holds 100. That number isn't random. Oda is showing how huge Luffy's will container is, even before the concept of Conqueror's Haki was ever mentioned. The result is a Luffy who doesn't feel like Luffy anymore. Blue skin, a body as big as Chopper's heavy point, a deep and cold voice. More importantly, he picks up a sword and fights like a real swordsman. Even though base Luffy doesn't know swordsmanship, that's direct proof that the shadows don't just boost stats. They transfer full muscle memory into his body. The biggest feat, Oars. A monster that the entire Straw Hat crew couldn't defeat after fighting for a long time. Gets blasted into the forest by Nightmare Luffy, with one hand using Gomu Gomu no rifle. And Nightmare Luffy's physical strength was probably one of the direct inspirations for Gear 4 Bounceman. Oda saw that level of power, then used it as a blueprint for Luffy's next power-up. Nightmare Luffy wasn't a dead end. It was a data point Oda collected and reused. Gear 2. Gear 2 was introduced at Enies Lobby. And this was the first time in the series that Oda showed Luffy wasn't just fighting his enemies. He was fighting his own body, too. The mechanism is very specific. Luffy uses his legs like hydraulic pumps, forcing his blood to flow much faster than normal. Because his blood vessels and organs are made of rubber, his body can handle that pressure without bursting. The result is a huge increase in oxygen and nutrients going to his muscles. His reaction speed, strength, and movement speed all rise to the point where he can surpass Soru. The top speed technique of CP9. His skin turns pink, and steam rises from his body because his metabolism becomes extremely high. Visually, Gear 2 looks simple, but mechanically, it's one of the most logically built power-ups in the entire series. What matters even more is what Gear 2 doesn't have. Luffy doesn't gain a new skill. He doesn't receive an outside ability. He just pushes his own biology to its limits. This is a turning point in Oda's power design. From here on, Luffy's power-ups are about internal optimization, not external buffs. But this is what most discussions about Gear 2 ignore. Rob Lucci was the first person in the series to point out that Gear 2 was destroying Luffy's heart from the inside. By forcing blood through his heart and circulatory system at abnormal speed, Luffy is creating something similar to real-life cardiac hypertrophy. The heart enlarges from high pressure, leading to long-term risk of heart failure. Robin also confirms the same thing in that arc. This isn't just flavor text. Oda is setting up a cost system. Every power-up Luffy uses comes with a specific price, not just a cooldown or chakra bar like other series. And that price is lifespan. After the time skip, Luffy learns to use Gear 2 inches short bursts instead of keeping it active constantly, reducing long-term damage while keeping the effect. When combined with armament Haki, Gear 2 creates Red Hawk, a punch that moves so fast the air ignites, producing an attack with both speed and heat. Gear 3. Gear 3 is probably the most underrated form in all of Luffy's progression. Not because it's weak, but because its side effect is so funny that people forget the real depth behind it. The mechanism is very specific. Luffy bites into his thumb joint to make a small hole, then blows air straight into his bones. His rubber bones expand, and his arm or leg grows as big as, or even bigger than, an ancient giant. This is important to separate Gear 3 from Gomu Gomu. No fusion before it when Luffy inflated his whole body like a balloon. His skin surface was still soft, and bullets would bounce off. Gear 3 is completely different. The bone hardens like a car tire pumped full of air, creating a massive, solid weight. When Luffy's opponents first saw Gear 3, they thought it was just for show, until that fist came down, and they realized it felt like getting smashed by a giant hammer. But here's what most people analyze wrong about Gear 3. This is the first form Luffy, designed by borrowing principles from outside physics. Gear 2 speeds up his blood circulation. That's physiology. Gear 3 pumps air into his bones. That's material mechanics. Luffy didn't learn this from anyone. He observed and figured out on his own that the same force applied over a larger surface area creates greater momentum. That's basic physics. And a kid described as not smart figured it out purely through battle instinct. That's extremely creative. Pre-time skip. Gear 3 had two serious problems. One, when his arm became giant-sized, Luffy's mobility almost dropped to zero. He couldn't use it against fast opponents like Lucci, and he couldn't use it in tight spaces. Two, after the effect ended, all that massive air escaped from his body, and Luffy shrank into a chibi-sized version of himself. The longer he used it, the longer he stayed tiny. That was the price of pushing his body beyond its natural limits. After the time skip, Oda solved both problems with a very elegant solution instead of spreading the air evenly through the entire arm. Luffy learned to concentrate all the air mass right behind his fist at the wrist. The rest of the arm stays normal. It can still stretch. It can still move fast. The result is that he keeps the firepower of Gear 3 without losing mobility, and he no longer shrinks after deactivating it. Same technique, but with completely upgraded precision. When combined with armament Haki, Gear 3 becomes one of the most reliable anti-durability tools in Luffy's kit, especially against huge and tough targets like the Kraken, Noah, or the Pacifista. The elephant Gatling attack on the ship Noah is the clearest benchmark. Luffy maintained that form continuously on a massive object without any side effects. Yeah, he was exhausted and losing blood, but not shrinking. Gear 4. If Gear 2 was a test of speed and Gear 3 was a test of strength, then Gear 4 is when Luffy finally answers the question those two gears created. How do you have both at the same time? The answer comes from the 2 years Luffy survived on Rusukaina, the island where every beast was stronger than his Gear 3. Boundman is not a power-up. Oda just handed him to serve the plot. It's the result of a man getting beaten over and over until he was forced to create something different. The core mechanism of Gear 4 is muscle compression. Luffy pumps air into his muscles instead of his bones like Gear 3, then coats those muscles fully with armament Haki to lock the air inside. The result is a body that is elastic and hard at the same time. When he gets hit, the force bounces back like hitting a fully inflated tire. When he attacks, the force shoots out like a compressed rubber cannon, releasing pressure. This is the first time in the series Luffy finds a balance between offense and defense in a single form instead of sacrificing one for the other. But what truly makes Gear 4 different in design is that it is a system with 3 specializations, not 3 completely separate forms. Boundman is the default state, balanced between attack, defense, and speed, and the form Luffy activates first whenever he enters Gear 4. His body inflates, purple steam surrounds him, and one of the funniest quirks in the series appears: Luffy cannot stand still on the ground because his body keeps bouncing. He moves by pushing off the air, basically combining Geppo with rocket propulsion. But here is an observation many people miss. Boundman uses principles from Rokushiki, high-speed movement like Soru, and air-stepping like Geppo. This is not random. Oda is showing Luffy absorbing and recreating the entire combat system of CP9. The same enemies he once fought, but couldn't keep up with at Enies Lobby, in his own way, instead of learning directly from them. Boundman is not invincible. You can still cut into Luffy's arm if your armament Haki is stronger than his. And Kaido can knock Luffy away with one Kanabo strike when his overwhelming power breaks through the compressed rubber defense. This is important when judging the form. Boundman works as a hard counter against opponents below its level, but against someone truly stronger, it has a clear ceiling. Tankman is the form the community often ignores. And honestly, not without reason. It appears only once in canon, and the condition to activate it is that Luffy has to eat enough food to inflate his body to an abnormal level. But technically, Tankman solves a specific problem that Boundman cannot. Cracker once cut deeply into Luffy's arm while he was in Boundman. But in Tankman, Cracker's piercing attack is completely blocked and pushed back. That is the clearest durability upgrade between the 2 forms. What's more interesting is how Tankman uses the opponent's mass against them when someone attacks Luffy's body. Instead of bouncing off immediately, they get pulled in and then blasted away like a bullet fired from a massive biological cannon. That is a completely different concept from Boundman, not just countering, but absorbing and then amplifying. Tankman is a situational form. It can only be used after Luffy overeats, unlike Boundman and Snakeman, which he can switch into any time during normal combat. That is why this form has never been used again. Its condition is too specific to appear often. Snakeman is the most debated form in the community, and often underrated in terms of design philosophy. Visually, his body does not inflate like Boundman, and Luffy's hair stands up like flames. It is the most compact and least impressive looking of the 3 forms, and that is exactly the point. Snakeman increases speed and allows Luffy to use Python to change the direction of his attacks mid-air. The punches become faster and stronger over time as they continue moving and colliding. It's not just a stronger punch. It's a punch that cannot be avoided because it adjusts its path toward the target. This was designed specifically to counter Katakuri's future sight. Seeing the future becomes useless if the attack can change trajectory after he has already decided to dodge. The trade-off of Snakeman is that its defense is almost non-existent. When Katakuri slams Luffy into the wall in the mirror world, Luffy takes the impact normally instead of bouncing like in Boundman. This is a form where one small mistake in positioning can mean a devastating counterattack. What all 3 forms share, and this is the most important cost of Gear 4. is that, after deactivating it, Luffy cannot use Haki for a certain period of time. Not tired. Not just weaker. Completely unable to use Haki. This means, if Gear 4 does not end the fight, Luffy enters a full vulnerability phase. Exactly what happened against Doflamingo, when Law and the Straw Hats had to protect him for 10 minutes. This is the first time in the series. A Luffy power-up comes with a cost that is not health or lifespan, but a specific amount of time where he cannot fight properly. Oda is designing a risk-reward system that becomes more complex with each gear. And interestingly, Boundman is basically a fusion of Snakeman and Tankman, an all-rounder form. Snakeman and Tankman exist as specializations because in extreme situations, you need to push one attribute to the maximum, even if you sacrifice everything else. That is why all three forms never become obsolete, even when used together. They are not upgrades of each other, but tools for different problems. And that is the philosophy Gear 5 later inherits. No single form is enough. Flexibility is the real weapon. Gear 5. The Gomu Gomu no Mi never actually existed. That name was a cover story. Its real name is Hito Hito no Mi. Model Nika, a mythical Zoan of the sun god. The god slaves prayed to for 800 years. The world government spent 800 years hunting this fruit and hiding it, erasing the name Nika from history books, even changing the fruit's name so no one would recognize it. And the thing they feared that much ended up in Luffy's hands. Gear 5 is not a power-up. It is an awakening. And that distinction matters much more than most fan discussions admit. When a Zoan awakens, the user does not gain a new outside ability. What awakens is the true nature of the fruit, which means for over 1,000 chapters, Luffy was only running on a fraction of what this fruit was truly capable of. When Zunesha, the ancient elephant carrying the island of Zo on its back, heard the drums of liberation for the first time in 800 years, it declared that Joy Boy had returned. That was not just a dramatic line. It confirmed that Gear 5 is not something Luffy created. It is something that waited for a worthy user for nearly a millennium. Mechanically, Gear 5 works under a principle that the power scaling community still debates without a clear agreement. Oda confirmed that the things Luffy creates from the clouds around his neck, helmets, goggles, even paint, are a gateway to Nika's fantasy, meaning they are not just visual gags. They are real. And this is what creates the ceiling of Gear 5. The 5 elders confirmed that the ability of the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika is limited only by the user's imagination. The community calls this Toon Force. And honestly, that description is not wrong. Oda compared Gear 5 to suddenly drawing Tom and Jerry inside a serious shonen series. When Luffy fought Kaido on Onigashima, the physics of that battle no longer followed the normal rules of the One Piece world. It followed cartoon rules. Kaido was turned into rubber and bounced away. The ground became a giant trampoline that reflected bolo breath. Luffy grabbed lightning from the storm clouds and used it like a rubber whip. Those were not random improvisations. They were expressions of a power system where the only limit is whatever Luffy can think of in that moment. Bajrang Gun is the clearest benchmark of this form. Luffy inflated his fist large enough to dwarf an entire island, wrapped it in the thickest armament Haki and Conqueror's Haki he had ever shown, and punched straight down, creating a shockwave strong enough to level mountain ranges and end the fight with Kaido. This is the technique Gear 3 tried to simulate back at Eni's lobby, but it was limited by the mechanics of pumping air into bones. Gear 5 does not need to pump air anywhere. It only needs Luffy to want his fist to be that big. The cost of Gear 5 is that it drains stamina so heavily that Luffy's body looks decades older after he deactivates it. This is the most intense cost in his entire progression, but also the purest one. There is no hidden long-term damage. He just needs to eat enough meat to recover. But here is what most Gear 5 discussions completely ignore. Joy Boy, the previous user of Gear 5, was confirmed to have mastered this form. No stamina issues. No loss of control. Luffy right now is still in the early stages of a power that his predecessor once used perfectly. And since Wano, Luffy has continued using Gear 5 against Kizaru and the 5 Elders. Each time with better control. Each time pushing the ceiling higher. Gear 5 is the answer to the question the series asked. From Chapter 1, what if the worst devil fruit in the world was actually something else? It turns out it was never the worst fruit. It was the fruit the world government feared most for 800 years. And what makes it terrifying is not just power, it is freedom. It has no ceiling. It is ridiculously the most absurd power in the world. The exact description the five elders used. Not Luffy. And Luffy still has not mastered it. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time.